without further ado, I'd like to we've got Kellie Jackson on the screen at the moment. Kellie is the community ranger and community in Western. I think I've got there. Let's just say community ranger for the Western Grassland Reserve and some other reserves in the in Melbourne's west. We also have James Neal, who is the I've got to get all of these right. Ranger team leader of the Western Grassland Reserve. James has been doing the hard yards on the Western Grassland Reserve longer than he would care to say now. It's apart from Steve Sinclair from ARI, I'd say he's the second longest standing person on the Western Grassland Reserve project. We have Nicholas Lawrence, who's a ranger at the Western Grasslands, and he's a fairly new recruit. And Jayden Maloney, Grassland Ecologist, again, he's come on board in the last year or two. You can correct me on the exact dates. Yes, well, these guys are going to chat to you, and then we'll have questions at the end. Please put them in the chat, or probably just feel free to interrupt. I'm sure they no. No, these guys rise to the occasion. No one ever does. No one ever does. But we're a very polite group of people, and we'll we'll have question and answer at the end, and we can ask all sorts of terribly difficult questions, which would be wonderful. I would like to say too that our lovely Environment Minister has yet to release the audit of the Melbourne Strategic Assessment that was tabled in Parliament last year. It's almost a year since it was tabled, so it's something that's been greatly nagging. So we don't actually have any solid evidence as to how the MSA is progressing in the last 2 years, but hopefully that audit will get landed sometime. And with that slightly bitchy comment, I will pass over to the good people who are fighting the hard yards. That's a terrible mixed metaphor of the Western Grassland Reserve. Kellie, over to you.
Thank you, Adrian, for that lovely introduction. And I would love to go back 250 years and see what Victoria was like way back then too. So as soon as someone invents a time machine, I'm in it. All right, I'm going to share the screen. Hopefully the technology does what I want it to. All right, participants can now see your screen. I'll just make it larger. I wanted to make it bigger. Why is it not being bigger?
Yeah, it looks pretty good, Kellie.
Does it? Oh, it's just not, our view is not good at our end. So I just want to play with it a bit more and see why it's not doing that. Minimize that. Why are we not seeing both, guys? I'm wondering.
The PowerPoint.
Sorry? Do you want to come and help for a second?
That one, that might work.
Beautiful. No, that's the one I want. Beautiful. Sorry about that, folks. Thank you. All right, I'll just go back to slide 1. All right, sorry about that. I'll get started now. Yeah, so as Adrian said, I'm Kellie Jackson, a Field and Community Engagement Ranger for the Western Grassland Reserve. And I'd like to thank Adrian and the Grassy Plains Network for inviting us to present and hosting our talk tonight. So tonight is part 1 of a 2-part presentation. So tonight's talk will delve into the detail and the background of the Western Grassland Reserve program, the history, the current on-ground work, and our future plans. Part 2 will be an in-person visit next week to the site known as Little Raven, which Nick discusses later in our talk. Little Raven site visit is where we get to focus on the completed works to date, while also witnessing the natural and assisted regeneration of a wide variety of plants found in Victorian grasslands. All right. I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and the elders from any communities who may be online with us tonight. So the Western Grassland Reserve sits on the country of the Bunurong, the Wurundjeri and the Wadawurrung people. They have lived in and been connected to the land, water, plants and animals of this area for many thousands of years. All right, so 3 members of our team will be presenting tonight on different aspects of our program. They've put together a very thorough overview of the program. There will be time for a few questions at the end, but I suggest you wait till the completion of our presentation before putting your questions in the chat, as many questions may be answered as the presentation progresses. With that, our first presenter tonight is James Neal, Ranger Team Leader for the Western Grassland Reserve, who has been with the program since 2016. A familiar face around the grasslands. With so much knowledge he happily shares with our team, James is going to give a brief history of the program, along with an overview of the team's work completed in the previous 12 months. We're sharing one computer for this presentation, so excuse us as we jump in and out of the camera. Thanks, James.
Hi all, good to see some familiar names in the
I don't know. Is that better? Let's go have a little.
I'm going to assume this is all working. If it isn't, Adrian, text Cal. Yeah, good to see some familiar names on the list. But we're probably going to oversimplify the Melbourne Strategic Assessment just to give a bit of context to the Western Grasslands and what we're talking about. I know a lot of you will already know a lot of this information, but if there is any newcomers within the audience, I'll hopefully make what we're about to tell you make a bit more sense. There's also a whole heap of additional presentations that we've given Grassy Plains Network in the past, so I'll assume Adrian will link us to that one. Thanks, Adrian. So basically, in a nutshell, what the Melbourne Strategic Assessment is a large ecological program. So in 2008, the state government identified that we're running out of room to house growing Melbourne and revise the urban growth boundary. To do this, they identified that there's going to be some negative impacts on biodiversity within the revised growth boundary. And there was requirements under the Environmental Protection Biodiversity Conservation Act, as well as the Fauna and Fauna Guarantee Act. So to appease this, basically, rather than every developer going off and finding their own offsets, the government stepped in and said, we will administer the finding and the securing of offsets. So DECA, Melbourne Strategic Assessment team, control and deliver a lot of that sort of stuff. Parks Victoria just sort of implement some of the land management activities with this. But it's important context. It's worth noting that this is a long-term program and it's expected to run pretty much until the development of the revised urban growth boundary is completed. So Melbourne Strategic Assessment isn't just the Western Grasslands, but that's a lot of our focus within our team. But there's also conservation areas. So these are the better areas identified within the revised urban growth boundary. So there's 36 reserves there that represent some of the best grassland within the revised patch. There's the Southern Brown Bandicoot program, which is to the east of Melbourne. And to be perfectly honest, I have little to do with that, so I can't provide too much detail to you on that. As well as the Grassy eucalypt woodland, which is to Melbourne's north. Again, don't have too much to do with that. Within some of the conservation areas within the revised urban growth boundary, there's a series of growling grass frog wetlands. They largely situated within the 36 conservation areas there. So across the board, there's a whole heap of different delivery partners, Parks Victoria, local governments, traditional owners, and other interested committees. So it's important to note here that the Western Grassland is secured as a nature conservation reserve under the Crown Land Reserves Act, but some of the other programs don't necessarily they're not going to necessarily be reserved as this, and may be reserved as under other mechanisms. Cool. So that's very big, broad overview. I didn't actually introduce the matters of national environmental significance on the first slide. So I'm going to quickly swing back. So these 12 species or communities, these are the 12 matters of national environmental significance. These are the large focus of the Melbourne Strategic Assessment Program. So each of the reserves or sub-programs, I guess, go to preserving those MS, so matters of national environmental significance. Zooming in a bit, so just considering the Western Grasslands now, and that's what the team here are delivering. There is a few matters of national environmental significance that the Western Grassland is designed to look after. So there's the stripies, golden sun moth, spiny rice flower, Brunton, wrinkled wart, and Snecko macacarpus, the large-headed fireweed, as well as the communities of natural timber grasslands, wetlands. So basically, that big green blob that you can see there, that's the Western Grassland area. So it's 15,000 hectares of area in which is under a public acquisition overlay. So basically, the Victorian government is committed to purchasing that area and establishing it into a reserve to manage for the listed MS there. The darker grey area there, it's worth noting that that is the revised urban growth boundary. So the Melbourne Strategic Assessment looks after that darker grey area. So the 36 conservation areas are located within that area. They're the best of the grassland that was in there. And the other stuff that wasn't the best is offset and goes to funding, management and acquisition of the Western Grasslands, the green area. The lighter grey area, that is non-MSA area, so the extent of the urban growth boundary before the revision in 2008. So yeah, some of the land in the Western Grassland, there is some really good values through there, but it isn't pristine. There's a whole heap of challenges with past land uses and weeds within there, which we are working to solve at scale. It's also probably worth noting at this point as well, that a public acquisition overlay and an acquisition of land is a pretty powerful ecological move in its own. It is reserved with the purpose of preserving an area of ecological significance. So any efforts to develop this into the future simply aren't allowed under the its reservation. Yeah, and no key MNet, so I did that twice. So that's the program at a whole. You're probably thinking, well, you said that's a DECA program. How does Parks fit in? So super simplified again. DECA do a lot of the the purchase of the land, and they appoint Parks Victoria as the land manager. So we'll go out there, see the values, and then we'll work to ensure that it's the ecological values there are managed for. So there's two aspects of that, and two broad outcomes that we're managing for. Number one is obviously delivering the ecological program. So it's weed management, biomass reduction, rehabilitation, all that sort of stuff, making sure the site's safe and clean. Then do that anyway. The second sort of broad outcome is to create a park that in the future, beyond the MSA, fits in with Parks Victoria's delivery structure. And that will see, or potentially will see reservation change into the future, and may involve community assets and, what I'm trying to say here, park infrastructure, I guess, like you would see in a lot of the other parks around the state. Cool. So program to date, I won't go into too much detail here. I know about a year ago, almost to the day, I reckon, we presented in front of some of you at the Little River Town Hall, and that was facilitated by Adrian. We gave a pretty deep dive into the past of the program. To summarise it, acquisitions had been quite slow in the beginning, but they have since picked up speed. And I think in that town hall, I hope I left you with quite a positive outlook for the next 12 months. It's got a bit of momentum, hired a whole heap of new staff, and we're looking forward to delivery. So I'm going to go into a bit of detail on the last 12 months, what we've delivered, and hopefully live up to my positivity. So the last 12 months, broader program stuff, it's pretty boring, but it's, I believe, very important. It helps shape the way that we're delivering works. So a lot of this stuff's been worked on by my boss, Greg, and another planning position, Mike. But probably one of the biggest changes is we've hired an additional staff member, Drew. He's an existing Parks Victoria employee, but before that worked for a large weed management contracting company. So he's brought some valuable skills across. It's also worth noting that the staff within and working on the Western Grasslands are now ongoing employees, which is a big change on the last, or the time before that, where we were going contract to contract. Drew coming on board now puts us up to a total staffing of 8 members. So that's 15% up on the last meeting, so 12 months ago. There's been some additional land that's been transferred to the Parks Victoria Land Register. I'm particularly excited about 2 of these parcels. One's got a large Pimelia spinescens population and just good quality vegetation on it, and another one has seen a lot of interim land management delivered by Whitman City in the past 3 years, I believe, and it's really good to see good quality land coming across. And the other example there, we've almost got a 3-year head start on working on it thanks to Wyndham. So I believe there's been another 591 hectares come across in the last 12 months, so another 5.5% increase. And 26.5% of the full area. Another significant change in the last 12 months is that our current funding agreement has been extended. That, although it sounds pretty boring, has some pretty big implications on approaching the market for longer terms, so we can start to provide longer contracts for obviously our staff, but contractors as well. I left you as we were just scaling up the rollout of our weed management program as well. So I believe that's run pretty well over the last 12 months, and I'll go into some figures on the scale up in that in a bit. And the other ones, other sort of bigger program changes, these aren't necessarily related to Parks Victoria, but I believe them to be pretty important. They've been facilitated by the MSA team, but the Deaker Fire side have had an additional position join them. So they're now up to 3 positions. And the municipalities of Melton and Geelong have both got an additional position. So that's matching Wyndham's 2 existing positions. So there's 4 positions within the municipalities. So it's not just Parks that's scaling up, it's the other delivery partners as well. Why I'm quite happy with the scale up of the other delivery partners is that we can now offload some of the, I guess, the legacy programs that Parks has been the default to take on. And it's just freeing up our time to concentrate on solving some of the landscape issues we've got out here and really focus more on delivering land management. So Jayden and Nick will delve into some of the specifics on weed management and rehab, just with the little Raven Pass saw. But I thought it's worth sort of flagging some of the broader bits and pieces that are happening across other parts of the reserve. I won't detail each of them, but just quickly, these are some of the things that are happening out there. So land transfers, we're required to detail each of the parcel risks and liabilities before it's transferred to Parks Victoria. Asset demolitions, so houses and sheds and alike, removal of dump rubbish, fencing, asset installation. That's as an example, Nick's installed a whole heap of water tanks that's making weed management much more efficient, as well as providing emergency water sources for fire. Pest animal management, animal compliance with illegal grazing. Another one of interest, and never really gets much credit, but there's a whole heap of plant and equipment purchases. So that's from the likes of buying trailers, small seed harvesters, hand tools, tanks to go on the back of vehicles, toolboxes and everything. So before recently, we never really had too much of that. Risk mitigation, hazardous items. There's a whole heap of legacy historic land use out there that we need to rectify to ensure that some of these areas are safe for our staff and contractors. We're scheduling fire within the landscape, working on grazing as a form of biomass management, sourcing plants and seed, double up there, plant and equipment. Cal's been doing a lot of work on community engagement as well. She's developed a junior range of programs. She's had community plantings, rubbish cleanups and the like, and engaging with the community more broadly. Probably less interesting, but it's still a fair amount of work, is the administrative requirement of reporting contract development and management, budgeting, agreements, all that sort of stuff. And there's prioritising all of the above there to make sure that we're delivering the ecological outcomes with the availability of the resources we have. So. And just a quick note, we do manage 2 conservation areas within the biodiversity conservation strategy. That's Conservation Area 2 and Trevor 9 South. And that's all these items are repeated there as well. So just as a way of a report card for ourselves, self-reporting, why not? But as Adrian mentioned, the Commissioner of Environmental Sustainability does audit the program every 2nd year and reports on the MSA's program. But while you're waiting for that, here's some quick numbers on delivery comparisons between financial year 24 and 25. But I will note that there's been a whole heap more works that hit the ground since the turn of financial year. So the numbers actually look a lot better than that. They're not perfect. They're pulled from a data set that we've got, and they're a bit of an indication. I reckon the numbers are probably a bit better than that, but I'm probably a little bit biased. But as you can see there, between financial year 24 and 25, there's been a fair uptick in weed management delivered, both in hectares as well as contracted days. Fencing is another example that's increased. So it's a 164% increase on financial year 25. And rehabilitation, I didn't know how to define this as a percentage, but in financial year 25, we just about delivered the same amount in hectares as we had to all time leading up to then. So it's worth noting here that behind every one of these kilometres and hectares and contracted days that we've mentioned is a huge heap of work, not just by the Parks Victoria team or the MSA or the partners that are delivering them, but they're contractors that are delivering this out on the ground as well. So really, really thankful for all the hard work that they've put on in the last 12 months and before then as well. So I'm going to wrap it up here, but I thought I'd just leave you on a bit of reflection over the last 12 months and give you one challenge, one win, and one highlight. I guess one of the biggest challenges has been we are going through a lot of this for the first time. So we're trying to put in good processes from the beginning. So it takes a lot more time, but starting to see now that it's paying off in the future. So yeah, it has been a bit of a challenge, but I think it's coming good. One win, I reckon it would be the expanding teams, both internally and externally as well. Everyone's passionate, hardworking, and knowledgeable. But more to that, they're just all-round good people as well. So that's been a real win. I reckon I've lucked out and although it's probably my recruitment, but my team's pretty unreal as well. So one highlight as well of the last 12 months is going out and seeing like the landscape scale changes that are happening out there. Some paddocks are no longer recognisable with the amount of box thorn that's been removed. Huge areas of dead and or dying serrated tussock out there. So been really good to observe that, and any sort of issues that I have observed, the staff, generally speaking, are already on top of it and have a solution in train. So yeah, that's probably about me. I'll hand back to Kellie. Yeah, so thank you guys.
Thanks, James. I hope anyone new to the program now has a better understanding of its complexities. Our second presenter tonight is Nick Lawrence. He's a field ranger with the Western Grassland Reserve. Nick and I started together in January 2024, and it was a crazy start and a cool journey up to this point. So this is a large and a long project with a small team of 8 people. That being said, there have been many achievements that have been made in that small amount of time. So Nick is now going to discuss the site he manages, known as Little Raven, which will also be the site we will be visiting next week. And I'll put more details at the end of the presentation about the site visit. So hopefully we'll see a few more of you then. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Kellie, and thanks to Adrian and the Grassy Plains Network for the opportunity to present tonight and share some of the exciting work our team and delivery partners have completed in the past 2 years at Little Raven. I'm aware a number of Grassy Plains members attended the site walk in 2024, but for those tuning in tonight who aren't familiar with the site, I'll briefly run you through a general introduction of the area of the site to give a sense of the area, as well as explain some of the themes and methods that have been used at Little Raven and elsewhere in the Western Grassland Reserve. So it's the southernmost area of the public acquisition overlay and sits within an agricultural landscape. So Little Raven's 230 hectares, which is slightly larger than Royal Park in the city, for those familiar with that park. And it has a variety of grassland states that roughly represent the overall quality of the Western Grassland Reserve, which makes it a useful example of the site and focus. So within the site, we've got 3 different ecological vegetation classes, and 3 broad ecological states, being Demeter grassland, C3 grassland, D-rocked grassland, and those states have a direct correlation to previous land use. So within the site, there are 5 remnant matters of national environmental significance, being plains grassland, seasonal herbaceous wetland, primarily spinescens, and the only remnant Senecio macrocarpus population within the Western Grassland Reserve, and the golden sun moth. So the focus of my presentation is going to be where we started at the beginning of 2024 at Little Raven, what we've done and where we wanted to go, but focusing primarily on the weed control efforts. So the newly acquired southern portion of the parcel consolidated Little Raven into one management unit, which streamlined a number of areas of management such as fire, fencing and weed control. So an ecological burn was completed in autumn 2024, and that's when our team had just started settling in, and for Kellie and I, that began a big process of the collation and analysis of site information, using resources such as the flora and fauna inventories from Arthur Ryler Institute, rapid assessment data, aerial photographs, local knowledge from the legends at Wynnum City Council and farmers, and looking for disturbance histories such as cropping, grazing, which provides an insight into the current site condition. Looking for previous land management actions such as historic fluoropronate use and burning. And all of these resources were providing information to develop a spot check for the site. So a general overview of the site and some of the running themes as displayed here in the SWOT assessment. Some of the strengths, we've got some really good existing high quality remnant C4 grassland areas. As I mentioned before, a number of different matters of national environmental significance, such as primarily spinescens and Senecio macrocarpus. Some of the weaknesses, there's been significant overgrazing in large portions of the property, and the areas of ecological value are somewhat isolated. Although some of the opportunities present at the site is there are substantial areas of moderately degraded grassland adjacent to high quality remnant areas, low to medium density Bothria cloa and stiper swathes existing underneath high density serrated tussock. Some of the threats, there's some established threats such as serrated tussock, Chilean and cane needle grasses and artichoke thistle, as well as a number of emerging threats such as love grass and African thistle. So we began by establishing a number of different management strategies informed by some broader management themes, starting off by defining some different zones, largely informed by the state and transition model for grasslands, as well as the different ecological vegetation classes. So land feature types such as stony knolls and wetlands have been a focus of our efforts as they contain significant native flora. Being an ex-agricultural landscape, there's a broad catalogue of weed species to choose from, but we've opted for a narrow schedule of species to be treated, which has allowed a substantially larger area to be treated in a more coordinated manner. So identifying and diagnosing significant emerging threats such as cane needlegrass and Chilean needlegrass and African thistle, with a focus on looking for those species in areas adjacent to high quality and medium quality remnant grassland stands. So these themes have ensured that we're retaining and protecting areas of existing high quality vegetation and their surroundings from weed invasion, as well as working towards connecting isolated ecological hotspot areas by enhancing moderately degraded areas through weed control and direct seeding to promote upward transition through states. So some of the considerations and compromises and balancing of management decisions. So we can't do everything all at once, and logistically large projects such as rehabilitation and fencing require the phasing of delivery. So with that in mind, thought had been put towards triaging problems and threats and creating a short list of target species and actions. Remaining vigilant for high threat species, which currently exist in very low numbers, before they become established within the parcel or landscape more broadly, and site preparation for rehabilitation works, capitalising on the ecological burn. So some of the short-term goals are reducing box lawn to less than 1% across the parcel, weed cover of listed species in hotspots reduced to less than 5%, and eradicating satellite infestations of Chilean needlegrass. Looking further afield into the medium and long term, some of the goals we've set are containing medium and large Chilean needle grass and cane needle grass infestations, establishing some woodlands and high threat Chilean needle grass areas as a form of long-term passive weed control, and reinstating species that are largely missing from the landscape, as well as addressing secondary tier weed species such as Cassinia and other thistle species. So, as James mentioned, one of the first actions of the year was the installation and repurposing of existing water tanks on the site, providing the site with access to water, which has vastly improved efficiency for weed spraying and assisting with tube stock planting, as well as a resource in the landscape for emergency response to wildfires. So, apologise for any cartographers out there, it's a pretty crude map. So in the pink areas, we have some of the hotspot areas which have been a real focus of intensive weed spraying since the ecological burn. And the objective has been to stabilise these high quality areas across these 3 zones, primarily focusing on artichoke thistle and serrated tussock. The blue polygons are artichoke thistle work, and we've been focusing on the low density infestations and chasing the artichoke into denser patches. The yellow cross-hatched polygon in the middle of the map is representative of 60 hectares of box lawn mulching of pretty high density infestations, and that was focusing as well on improving site accessibility. And the smaller scattered orange polygons, it's been a focus of Chilean and cane needle grass mapping and treatment. And the aim was to identify the presence of these species across the southern portion of the parcel and develop a response to contain and eradicate, which involves surveying, mapping, treating, and revisiting to monitor for new germinates and previous treatment effectiveness. And part of these broader works has been for site preparation for C4 grassy rehabilitation across 3 areas. And as well, throughout the year after the burn, observing the site's response to the ecological burn, monitoring for emerging threats, as well as natural regeneration of moderately degraded areas that were showing some really good signs of potential. So I've included some pictures here. We can see on the top left some vast areas of serrated tussock being sprayed out in some high quality grassland areas. Again, some of the land feature types that have been a focus of management. We've got a stony knoll on the right there, top right. The bottom left, some of the box lawn mulching that was completed. And the bottom right showing some of the cane and Chilean needlegrass mapping and treatment, focusing on containing those infestations. So this year, in the northern portion of the paddock, and again, it's another crude map, but it was starting to get a bit busy. So some of the broad themes are represented in this. The northern paddock and the red boundary consisted of 85 hectares of box lawn control and around the site boundary. That was in preparation for serrated tussock boom spraying and the installation of a new boundary fence. Again, the pink areas are the hotspots, follow-up work in these high-value areas, targeting the same species, focusing on artichoke thistle and serrated tussock, and really starting to push into areas of the moderately degraded C3 areas with the aim of merging these management zones. The blue areas, those polygons, again, focusing on low-density infestations of artichoke and chasing them into denser patches. And again, an expansion of the cane and Chilean needlegrass program out there. The white polygon is 114 hectares of high-density serrated tussock boom spraying, and that was across a highly degraded different areas across the site, consisting of ex-cropland. And you can see a lot of those areas are adjacent to high-value areas. This treatment option is the most cost-effective way of treating larger stands of serrated tussock and has a predictable outcome over the next 35 years. So the lighter rate of flupropionate used in this management action firstly retains the existing remnant grassy understory species such as Chloris and Bothria cloa, which stand to really benefit substantially from the reduction of weedy C3 grass competition, but also retains much of the existing native C3 species such as Ostrostipa. And secondly, allowed for a larger area to be treated, providing a multi-year suppression of the serrated tussock across a large portion of the parcel, which is going to allow us to focus our energy and efforts into the existing high and medium quality remnant grassland zones with the aim of having upward movement across the state and transition model. We also completed another supplementary seeding program, but I won't delve into the detail of that. That's going to be the focus of Jayden's talk. So again, some more pictures here. We've got some boom spraying in the top left. The top right is expanding outwards from the previously treated areas. And then the bottom 2 photos are a good example of be pushing into the moderately degraded areas and trying to connect those zones into one consolidated unit. So what have we done so far? These efforts are displayed in numbers, but I think illustrates one of the strategies we've taken to target a small species list, and that's allowed us to treat substantial areas instead of getting bogged down in smaller areas with a larger list of target species. And pushing our way towards these broader management themes allows us to work in a coordinated manner and make meaningful gains. Some of these species, many will know, are low-hanging fruits, and others will be a longer game that will require persistence, which is why we've put significant effort into them early with positive results so far. So where to next? We're going to be continuing with the ongoing maintenance of previously treated hotspots and consolidate those wins. We know management always requires follow-up, especially in highly productive grassland environments. We continue seed harvesting of high-quality areas, focusing on species such as Demeter, Ostrostipa species, as well as herbs and forbs. And the serrated tussock boom spraying will allow us to shift our focus and resources to targeting artichoke thistle, cane and shilling needlegrass, as well as giving us more agility to address emerging threats and secondary threat species such as Cassinia and spear thistle, as well as focusing on looking towards tree and shrub establishment for cost-effective and passive weed control of degraded areas, as well as stony knoll rehabilitation. I'll finish my section of tonight's presentation with a challenge, a win and a highlight from the past 2 years at Little Raven. I think the biggest challenge for myself at the site has been learning a new site after an ecological burn, and that's an ongoing challenge as seasons change and new species pop up. I think a huge win has been observing the natural regeneration after the reintroduction of fire to the landscape for the first time in decades for a portion of the property. We've discovered roughly 15 Plymelias spinescens. The Senecio macrocarpus population is naturally increasing. New species are popping up in multiple zones such as Caesia, Caliantha. And I think a highlight for me has been working with dedicated contractors to deliver weed control and rehabilitation works. I really want to highlight and recognise the efforts of Tegan, Sam, Nelson, Darby and Aruna and their colleagues who have worked methodically towards the positive ecological development of the site. So thanks, Adrian and the Grassy Plains Network for the opportunity to speak to everyone tonight and for everyone listening in. And I look forward to meeting some of you in person next week on the site walk and talk.
Thanks so much, Nick. Little Raven is an example of one of about 14 management parcels across the reserve. So the team uses these processes to manage every parcel. Our third presenter tonight is Jayden Maloney. He's an ecologist with the Western Grassland Reserve, and Jayden moved from New South Wales in January last year to join our team. The team appreciates his support with species knowledge and strategic planning goals that makes day-to-day work uncomplicated. Over to you, Jayden.
Thanks, Kel. Hi, everyone. So coming off the back of Nick's Little Raven site focus, I'm going to broaden scope to outline some holistic rehabilitation planning works within the Western Grassland Reserve. So as many of us can attest to, temperate grassland rehab can be a difficult challenge. And given the background of the reserve and the wider MSA program, landscape scale rehab can be daunting. However, we have begun to make significant progress over these past 18 months. I'm going to begin this section of the presentation detailing some of the current challenges impacting upon our rehab works, transitioning to works delivered given these challenges, briefly detailing strategic directions from here, and then finishing off with our restoration ambitions. So currently, some of the main factors influencing rehab works in the reserve include nutrient legacy, soil disturbance limitations, the native seed supply, and of course, weeds. I won't go into weeds as the implications of weed competition are well known, and we are currently undertaking a significant amount of weed management works across the reserve itself. So first up is nutrient legacy. The grassland vegetation comprising the reserve is very heterogeneous in composition, reflecting the historical land management activities across the reserve. So much of the reserve has been heavily grazed or historically cropped. So these practices have enriched the soil with nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus. Nutrients, specifically phosphorus, can reside in the soil profile for decades. This is a limiting factor when it comes to rehabilitation, as these elevated nutritional conditions tend to advantage a suite of exotic species that are adapted to higher nutrient loads. Soil disturbance. So currently within PV, we have limitations on activities that disturb the soil surface due to possible impacts on Indigenous cultural heritage. It is a legal responsibility to manage any Indigenous cultural heritage as per the Aboriginal Heritage Act 2006 and the Aboriginal Heritage Regulations 2018. Currently, most of the reserve is not covered by a CHMP or a Cultural Heritage Management Plan. Thus, the land has not been surveyed for any potential cultural heritage artefacts. Thus, any rehab work that involves significant levels of disturbance is limited. However, it is anticipated that CHMP will be undertaken for the reserve in the short to medium term, which will then alleviate limitations on our rehab methods. Seed supply. So as most of you are aware, sourcing seeds is difficult given the lack of it, and it will be a key challenge for the PV Western Grasslands team here. It is recognised that the main pathways for responsibly sourcing seed are in situ harvesting, so that's harvesting from within the reserve itself, non-MSA harvesting, so harvesting from areas not covered by the MSA, and commercial purchasing. In situ harvesting across PV tenured parcels within the reserve is a process that is and will be conducted appropriately. Harvesting will be strategically planned and based on ecologically sound decision making. So numerous harvesting projects have been conducted over the last few years using a brush harvester, and more recently with the procurement of a grass grabber. In the longer term, it is an aspiration that the reserve will be home to native pastures and seed production areas, or SPAs, enabling greater self-sufficiency in regard to seed sourcing. Given the current limitations on the creation of SPAs, purchasing from commercial growers and suppliers is a necessary pathway for native seed. And I do note that there are a couple of seed suppliers in the audience tonight, so good evening to you all. Over 1.3 tonnes of native grass seed has been procured over the past 18 months. Additionally, approximately 20,000 native bulb tube stocks have been procured this calendar year. These procurements have assisted in stimulating the region's native seed sector. To assist in alleviating stresses in the sector, we've established or re-established relationships and are effectively communicating with our partners in the sector, from small local growers to larger native seed suppliers. Additionally, we're hoping to provide more certainty to suppliers in the future by transitioning into longer-term contract-based agreements, which enable businesses to rely on the consistent demand. Delivered rehabilitation. So despite these challenges, scalable rehab works within the reserve accelerated in the 2024-2025 financial year. However, we're still very much in our infancy. The undertaking of rehab works has largely been basic in delivery with a rudimentary level of planning. Basically, rehab works have centred on rehab zones of low to moderate condition grasslands that have had an ecological burn and had pre and or post fire weed management conducted on them, with a perfect example being the Little Raven site focus, as summarised by Nick earlier. The four grasses, approximately 19 hectares of native grassland rehabilitation projects were undertaken. Sites have generally been prepared for rehab via an ecological burn and pre and post fire weed management. The primary method of direct seeding of native grass seed has been conducted by hand broadcasting onto post-burn soil surfaces, which have relatively friable soil and low levels of biomass. C3 grasses were hand broadcasted in the cooler months, so autumn and winter, and C4 grasses were seeded in spring. C3 grass rehabilitation has been comprised of early colonising species such as wallaby grasses, as well as your locally occurring Ostrostype species. C4 grasses have comprised of early colonising and pioneer species such as Chloris truncata and Boswellia macra, as well as the keystone species Themata triandra. The rationale for these mixes is that we know that Themata can have longer periods of dormancy, and we're attempting to fill in that potential dormancy period with these early colonising species. Seeding rates have varied between 20 to 50 kilos per hectare, depending on mix composition and due to the higher rates due to a lack of soil disturbance. Native forb rehabilitation is comprised of the planting of approximately 13,000 tube stocks over just this last month into post-burn sites, with approximately 5,000 more plants to go in the ground next week. Planting has been conducted in high condition rehabilitation sites with the aim of adding forbs which have been historically lost. Planting was comprised of 26 species indicative of the temperate grasslands, including the matters of national environmental significant species, the large fruit groundsel, and the button wrinklewort. So a specific example of delivered combined grassy and forb rehabilitation is the example of which Nick touched on earlier at Little Raven, where approximately 11 hectares of rehabilitation works have been conducted, including the broadcasting of approximately 230 kilos of grass seed and the planting of approximately 5,000 forbs. Strategic direction. So currently, an overall restoration strategy for the reserve is being written up internally for the PV team. This strategy provides a framework for strategic planning, for the procurement of resources, on-ground delivery, and monitoring and adaptive management stages of rehabilitation works. Our strategic direction is based off the scientific literature, discussions with local experts, and our shared anecdotal on-ground learnings from our team and the old Grassy Plains Network session. So the strategy is not an ironclad document. It is amendable and will be altered as new learnings and information become available. The strategy will be framed by some guiding principles. So I would like to briefly touch upon two primary principles, which are the emphasis on rehabilitation efforts post-disturbance events, primarily ecological burning, and rehabilitation effort could be influenced by natural regeneration. So as most of you know, grasslands are disturbance-driven ecosystems. So due to inappropriate livestock grazing regimes and cropping, fire has largely been removed from the landscape, despite grasslands having been shaped for millennia by Aboriginal fire use. So each year, parcels within the reserve are nominated for future burning as part of the Joint Fuel Management Program, or the JFMP. The JFMP is a statewide program that manages fuel on public and private land over a rolling 3-year cycle. Forest Fire Management Victoria staff have developed the program in consultation with relevant stakeholders, including local councils, flora and fauna experts, knowledge from local communities, including traditional owners and other key stakeholders. So the PV Western Grasslands team assists in nominating parcels of land within the reserve that we believe should be prioritised for burning for ecological reasons. With prescribed burning being the primary biomass reduction tool used within the reserve, significant emphasis will be placed on rehabilitation efforts in the first and second year after an eco-burn. Restoration efforts will be less prioritised from the third year after a burn as biomass levels begin to accumulate to an extent that hinders seed germination and plant establishment. Another factor that will limit rehabilitation works in the 3+ years post-ecological burning is the next impending prescribed burn allocated for that specific parcel. So as part of the JFMP process, each parcel of land has a prescribed burning frequency. So for most parcels that contain relatively good condition grassland states, the recommended burning frequency is 3 to 5 years. Thus, if direct seeding and planting of native grasses and forbs occurs in the 3+ years after the prior burn, there is a chance that there may not be enough time for restored individuals to establish. Again, this is not an ironclad principle, it is a fluid guide. For example, biomass levels may still be low after 2 years of low rainfall, enabling potential rehabilitation efforts. Additionally, nominations for burning may be pushed back and occur later in that 3 to 5 year cycle, again, enabling rehabilitation efforts. So our rehabilitation efforts will be influenced by the capacity of natural regeneration in our grasslands. So within the context of the reserve and the MSA program, fire will be the primary method of stimulating natural regeneration. The capacity for natural regeneration within our grasslands is limited by numerous factors. So both heavy grazing and cropping have had significant impacts on the natural regeneration capacity of these grasslands, predominantly due to nitrification and historical grazing pressure of palatable native grasses and forbs. As mentioned above, rehabilitation efforts will be predominantly conducted in the first 2 years after an ecological burn. So given these two guiding principles, for grasses, rehabilitation efforts will largely be conducted in areas that are degraded or with little to no signs of native natural regeneration post-burning. At this early stage, efforts will largely be conducted in areas where nutrient levels are low to moderate. And by and large, forb rehabilitation will be conducted in relatively good condition grassland states, already comprised of largely native grasses. Objectives. So Nick mentioned some site-specific objectives on a parcel level earlier, and I would like to outline some holistic objectives across the entire reserve. So the objective of our rehabilitation works within across the reserve align closely with the conservation outcomes of the Melbourne Strategic Assessment program. Objectives of rehabilitation work specifically for our team include meeting our MSA-directed KPIs of relevant MNES entities, improving the condition, structure and function of natural temperate grasslands and seasonal herbaceous wetlands, increasing the abundance, cover and diversity of native perennial grasses and forbs, transitioning between grassland states as per the state and transition model, reintroducing native grasses and forb species where natural regeneration is lacking or absent, mitigating exotic weed threats, creating harvestable areas of native grass and forbs, and providing opportunities to increase stakeholder engagement, and assisting in the stimulation of the native seed industry. So I just want to quickly touch on some considerations which will be factored into all of our rehabilitation works in the future. So first up is grazing. On many PV tenured parcels, despite livestock removal, there are growing grazing pressures on our grasslands in the form of kangaroo and rabbit grazing. Grazing presence and pressure will be a significant consideration in the design and implementation phases of our future rehabilitation works, particularly plantings. Climate adaptability is also a significant factor when it comes to sourcing seed for our works. So we are currently working on the principle of being influenced by climate adaptability, not just geographic range. Seed from in and around the Werribee Plains is fragmented and limited. We are indeed sourcing seed from these areas. However, we are also sourcing seed from drier climate areas of southeastern Australia from numerous provenances. These principles will hopefully lead to the introduction of numerous genes back into the gene pools of grass and forb species being used for rehabilitation works within the reserve itself. Seeding versus planting decisions. So there are numerous factors that will influence whether to seed or plant for our rehabilitation works across the reserve. Neither direct seeding nor tube stock planting are suitable for all situations. In some situations, both direct seeding and tube stock planting will be warranted. For instance, species diversity of seeded areas can be enhanced further by tube stock planting of species not suited for direct seeding. Generally, for scalable rehabilitation, grass species will be direct seeded. For forb rehabilitation, a combination of seeding and planting is likely to be used. Rehabilitation ambitions. So it is anticipated that our rehabilitation works will become more efficient and effective in the future. The challenges detailed earlier are being worked through. In the shorter term, some of the ambitions that we would like to enact are the increasing the hectareage of grassy rehabilitation efforts, concentrating on transitioning from degraded to high condition states. Increasing the hectareage of forb rehabilitation efforts, concentrating on the transitioning from moderate condition to higher condition states. Supplementing existing rehabilitation zones with grass and seed where appropriate. Further reintroducing our MNES species. Reintroducing shrub and tree layers for woodland and stony knoll mapped areas, as well as usage for weed threat mitigation via allelopathic effects. Increase our collaboration with traditional owner parties in the rehabilitation space, potentially collaborating on harvesting, rehabilitation methods, planting of culturally important species, and knowledge sharing. In the medium to longer term, we would like to create a forb SBA or nursery to increase seed volumes used for our rehab works. The creation of in situ grassy SBAs, increasing our storage facilities for seed, enabling more self-sufficient processing and storage, and as mentioned earlier, the longer-term contract agreements with suppliers. So I'll finish off with a challenge, a win and a highlight as well. So a challenge of mine has been the planning and forecasting of where our rehabilitation work should occur, given all the complexities involved in landscape scale grassland rehabilitation, including, but not limited to, land management history, nutrient levels, grazing pressure, seasonality, the lack of rain, burning regimes, and factoring all that in the context of knowing that we have a finite amount of seed within the sector. A win for me has been how we are transitioning from more strategic decision making and planning in regard to our rehabilitation work. So last year, as Kellie mentioned, we were very much all still new to our roles. And yeah, even on a personal, I was quite overawed by of the scale of the program. And no, to be honest, I still a little bit am. But 18 months later, we are planning and conducting works with the best practice ecological and rehabilitation practitioner knowledge in the context of our governmental intricacies. And a quick highlight of mine has just been simply the germination of our little grass seedlings and successful establishment of our hooks. And you can see some of the images on the slide there. So yeah, that's it for me. Cheers, Adrian, for facilitating this presentation, and yeah, looking forward to seeing some of you at Middle Raven next week. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, Jayden. So I just wanted to say I'm a bit biased, but I love talking about and listening to the others talk about this project that we're all involved in. Like Jayden said, it's huge and awe-inspiring, but I think we're really making inroads. So thanks to everybody who've listened tonight, and including any local contractors that are out there. Once again, I really appreciate what they do. They're on site most days doing the hard work in all weather conditions. So just a reminder that we have our second part of this presentation coming up, which is the in-person tour of the Little Raven site. Now, if you can think back to Nick's slides, those pink areas are some of the areas that we'll go and have a look at. Walk through the boomed areas and yeah, just have a good look at what all that work that Nick's been doing out there. And yeah, I think it's a good way to see it on a map and then put it into perspective when you stand on the ground and look around. So I'll just flick to the next slide in a minute, and it's got all the details for the tour, which has to be booked through the Grassy Plain website. And we all love having a chat about this project. So we'll all be there next week with a few more of our team to meet everybody and have a bit more of a talk. So I'm going to stop. I'll move to the next slide for a minute. So this site is quite large to walk around. So please wear closed footwear, bring appropriate gear for the weather, and water and snacks is needed. So when arriving at the site, on the verges outside the gate, there are Pimelia and other threatened species along there. So please don't park on the verge. The gate will be open, and just drive in and follow the road up to the water tanks, and there's plenty of room for everybody to park up there. So I'll just leave that up for a second longer, but that's us done, Adrian. So if I'll stop sharing because I can't see the chat or anything right now. So I'll just stop sharing for a minute.
Okay.
I'll minimize that. And I've lost the Zoom now somewhere.
You're okay, Kellie? All good?
That one. Beautiful. All right, we're back. I can see you again, Adrian. That's
Okay.
great.
Well, I can see you too, or at least you're forward.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
If I'd
Yeah,
known that was
much
going
better.
on, I would have adjusted it sooner.
Okay, no. So thank you,
That
thank
was-
you. That was great. Lots of information, and nice to see such level of detail and ambition and so on, and some scaling up. I guess there are questions in the chat, but I'll start off just by perhaps it's a question to James more than anything. You've done some scaling up, but I think we've all been saying this for a long time, that it's we really need a lot of scaling up very quickly, and I understand that you've overcome a lot of barriers to that, like your contractual arrangements and so on. But do you think that you're going to be able to like get a bigger team in place soon? And what's the limitations here now? Is it the MSA funding, like the per hectare amount of money you're getting? I understand the levy's going to be reviewed shortly, or is in the process now. Yeah, can you talk us through a little bit of that, please, James?
Yeah, so the scale up over the last 12 months, it's forecast to continue. The extended funding agreement that I mentioned as well. So there is another wing of in-house delivery that's proposed within that. So we'll start delivering some of the land management ourselves, Parks Victoria. The contractors are scaling with us as well, so that aspect will also scale. But yeah, in the next few years, in 12 months' time, I would very well imagine that there will be a few additional staff members with us.
That'll be great. That'll be great.
Certainly will.
Now, okay, questions. Gee, there are some long questions here. Hold on, we'll come back to something tough. Well, does anyone want to shout out a question while I'm frantically scrolling through stuff?
I'll jump in, Adrian, if you're happy to.
Yeah, good on you, John. Please.
Yeah, terrific, Adrian, to have organised this, and thank you to the folks who have presented. To what extent is monitoring funded and supported by expertise? Because you're doing a lot of things which are ambitious, but we need to know whether they're successful, if they're going to be expanded. And I'm just wondering whether monitoring, serious monitoring, actual, really serious monitoring of these activities, direct sowing, planting, etc., are going to be undertaken, and if there's any planning for that.
Yep, Jayden will answer that, John.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so all of our rehabilitation activities have some level of monitoring, and that includes our direct seeding, hand broadcasting of seed, and our tube stock plantings so far. And those forms of monitoring have varied in type, so they can be a bit more landscape scale in terms of visualization. So we have our photo monitoring points visualizing landscape scale change, but then we also have monitoring plots themselves that are set up and undertaken by me just to start the ball rolling. So that includes monitoring of the germination and establishment of our native grass seeds, as well as the establishment and longer-term survivability of our tube stock plantings. And with every rehabilitation activity that is proposed and to be undertaken into the future, there will be some form of monitoring undertaken, enabling us to adaptively manage sites and learn from these experiences to help shape our future rehabilitation works.
Yeah. Jayden, words like some form of monitoring are sort of a bit of a concern, because it is such a critical component of understanding whether your KPIs are being met. And I just wonder if there shouldn't be a greater emphasis on actual independent external monitoring from Arthur Weiler or any of those other expert groups with permanent plots, if that's the appropriate technique.
So ARI does do annual monitoring across the Western Grassland Reserve and MSA by the conservation areas. So they are monitoring for the diversity of species, the composition of exotic and native species as well. So that form of monitoring is conducted by ARI, and we internally have our own monitoring processes being put in place.
Yeah.
And that ARI monitoring is quite thorough, and that's what we're hoping to see in the CES audit, John, that's being withheld. But yes, I think your point is about the monitoring of the more experimental.
That's right. The very specific monitoring of direct activities, which is supposed to transition the vegetation, and we need evidence as to whether it is transitioning the vegetation and which are the better methods. I'm very aware of the cost and the difficulty and all that, but it just seems to me that this is an opportunity to get really hard data on just how effective these various activities are. I mean, for instance, you're talking about planting in a couple of weeks' time or next week or something. That seems extraordinarily late to be putting tube stock into that environment. Now, I may be quite wrong. I'd like to know that I'm wrong, but I think we need to know.
Those tube stock plantings, John, were conducted about a month ago now. That's the majority. Due to delays in the propagation process from the nursery, some of those got delayed. And we have factored that in with supplementary watering once the plants go into the ground, and then throughout the summer, upcoming summer. So hopefully we do get some rain, but when we don't, that supplementary watering is a pretty good substitute for the time being.
Yeah, that's a difficult technique to make work, but yeah, okay. And just very, very quickly, and I understand I'm dominating this, but is there any evidence that seed production, particularly in the forbs, is being encouraged by your program, independent of the SBA? Are you seeing an increase in seed production? High quality seed production. Is it developing new enterprises?
Yeah. So our forb procurement basically only started this year, very early this year. So in terms of temporal, scales, basically our planning for 2026 is in its current stage, procuring of these species for next year. And nurseries that we are in collaboration with are very much aware of the incoming demand for these forb plantings as well as seed, and they are putting in processes that hopefully are going to increase that supply of forb seed into the future. And yeah, hopefully that has positive outcomes for our program.
Okay, thanks, Jayden.
Yes, we all want to see more forb seed production, don't we? It's absolutely critical, and it's
so easy. It's so easy to do.
Yeah. Vanessa, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks very much. Sorry, I had to nip out for a sec, so I hope that my question in the chat hasn't already been answered. You popped up some slides talking about the budget increase and the increase in staffing and so on. Look, as an ex-DECA employee, I know very well what the budget situation is like, and you have my deepest sympathy. And in no way am I trying to shoot any messengers. However, was that budget increase at the expense of other PV programs? Because I know that the PV programs are dying.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there, Vanessa. Simply no, it's not. The Melbourne Strategic Assessment through a cost recovery program. So the offsets for the grassland that's destroyed within the revised urban growth boundary is paid by developers, a levy, and that goes to funding the management actions, the purchase of land and everything. So our program is very much separate from, in a way, the business as usual dealings of Parks Victoria and Deaker and everything. So
understood.
Funded ecology on the developer.
You're probably the envy of the rest of Parks Victoria, James, because you actually have secure jobs, which is something we wish the rest of Parks Victoria had. Hey.
Yeah, there's a few changes coming, and it is good that, you know, this is enshrined in legislation, the Melbourne Strategic Assessment program.
Yeah.
Can I just add another one? You're talking about burning regimes. Have you got, I mean, given that we have sort of a bit of a view that if there's been a history of light sheep grazing, you don't move off that unless there's a really good reason. Are you transferring from burning to lightly grazed paddocks, or is it in areas where it's completely crap and you're just trying to rehabilitate from scratch?
Sorry, can you just repeat the last bit?
Okay. The thing is, okay, given that the Grassland Reserve, they did have a history of grazing. Our general view, as a broad brush, is if you've got a grassland that's in halfway decent nick because it's had a history of light grazing, particularly by sheep south of the Divide, you stick with that unless there's a good reason for changing. So I'm asking, the areas that you're burning, are those in any of those historically grazed areas, or are you going into new areas that massively need rehab because they're probably the priority?
Column A and B. So yes to both. We are burning areas that have been historically grazed. We are working on a grazing strategy to enable grazing to continue there for ecological purposes. At this point in time, we need to work through a bit more to make grazing at a landscape scale here on the basalt more feasible. So we're looking into the future and want to keep grazing in their area. Some of the areas that are good, that are no longer grazed, require biomass reduction. Burning is a tool that we have in our holster, so we're applying it there. We are also applying it to the more degraded areas that were historically grazed. The benefits that we can have with an open sward for, I guess, rehabilitation efforts, as well as weed management bits and pieces. We're seeing some very big increases in gains that we can make there. So on a landscape, we're trying to juggle with the available resources to make sure that we can burn enough to, I guess, make the program work. All that is scaling up, and again, funded through the cost recovery stuff, and it is starting to scale up. So we're at a point where we need to make trade-offs in the scale and size that we're burning, and temporally as well. So ideally, and hope in 10 years' time, that we will be burning 360 days a year, where it is right in each individual patch, and quite frequently. At this point in time, we're not quite there yet. We're seeing that we can make benefit on large areas with larger burns at this point in time, but hopefully it will be changing pretty rapidly into the future. So yeah, more frequent patchy burns will.
Because sometimes moving from grazing to burning isn't totally ideal if you're going to be hitting up burning sensitive species that survived under grazing. But nevertheless, I would totally applaud you that any biomass removal is better than none at all. So if that's all you got to go for it.
No, I almost think that you've done some burns values checks in the past there, Vanessa, the way you're
possibly.
Yeah. But that's it. Like we're trying to balance trade-offs between species where we can't necessarily do it on a parcel or a burn delivery. We're looking temporally. So if we were to negatively affect one species in the first biomass reduction, maybe the next one we do it at a time that isn't as negative for that species. But a lot of these burns will have 6, 7, 8 different conflicting values within them. So,
like I said, get the biomass down if the best way you possibly can. Yeah.
Makes life a lot easier.
Yeah.
It's great to see you considering a grazing strategy too, James. We're looking forward to seeing that. And just on the subject of strategies, you mentioned you've got an internal restoration strategy or strategy in process. Is there going to be a chance for us to have a look at that and to input and just generally give you a hard time over it?
It's currently being written at the moment, Adrian, so we're not even at the first draft stage of that strategy.
Okay,
So,
well, that's a good time to get input right at the
Yeah.
start. No,
Yeah.
it's okay, fantastic. But we'll look forward to that. Ho ho. It's whatever. The other thing I suppose I want to ask, and it's a well, hold on. No, I should ask somebody else's question, not my question. Stephanie Jones wanted to know if you use volunteers to help with your work, like at what I don't think there has been yet in the Western Grassland Reserve, but it would still, it's one of those things that we really, really want is like, where's the community engagement going to really to bite in this space?
Yeah, we're probably not quite there yet in terms of the community engagement and turning up and grabbing a knapsack or something to go and get stuff done. We do have a vision to do more of that into the future, and we're probably looking at more a community planting style day into the next 12 months. Yeah, so it will be small steps. Through the summer, we went up north and looked at another grassland in New South Wales and how they were managing their patch of land essentially. And yeah, some very good learnings about volunteers and engagement there. So,
Okay, which grassland was that, James?
Breadbow. So yeah, Phil there showed us around. It's bush heritage property there, just south of Canberra-ish area. Yeah.
Okay, and look, a big. Do you think you ever get on? Here's the $10 million question. Will you ever get on top of the weeds? Do you think? Like about the question goes to the long-term future, because at the moment you've got a bucket of money, though you're about being limited resources and trade-offs and so on. But in the future, when like the MSA stops giving you money and the whole thing is Parks Victoria land, what's going to happen then, do you think? Like will the weed load just explode again because we haven't been able to get on top of it just because of the nature of the problem?
Yeah, to be realistic about it, eradication I don't think will ever be achieved. Realistically, I don't know of a single plant, like a weed that's been at this scale that has been eradicated anywhere. So I don't think it will ever be eradicated. If you asked me 12 months ago and I gave you an honest response, I probably would have been less positive than I am now. Seeing, I guess, the tools that we're working with at scale now, I think we will be able to improve these areas substantially. If it's to the point where they will look after themselves, like a Themata-dominated C4 grassland, maybe not. Time will tell. Eradication, probably not. Huge improvements in making more robust grassland. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, that was 15 minutes.
That would be time for you to go home, I suggest. So okay, well, it is 8 o'clock as your alarm indicates. And look, there have been a lot of positive comments. I know we're giving you a hard time, but that's the nature of these things. There have been lots of positive comments in the chat too, that it's inspiring and it's great to see such a dedicated group of professionals and so on. So we're not taking that away from you in the least. We're just it's it's of course means so much to so many people. So it's we're we really want to see the best outcomes, and yeah, indeed.
Your advocacy is very much appreciated, Adrian. Even though you do give me a hard time every now and again, it's for the right reasons. So yeah, good on you.
Very good. Well, perhaps we should, unless someone has a really pressing question they want to ask, perhaps we should wind up and get on with our lives and let Parks Victoria get back to their work. I have put the link to the registration for the Little Raven event in the chat, so do get off and join us next week for that. I'm very much looking forward to it. So thank you guys. Thank you, Kellie, very much, holding it all together. And yes, well, thank you.
One more thing to say,
Yeah.
Adrian, if you want to take down the questions that we didn't get to and email them through to us, we're happy to have a go at getting our heads around them. And if those people are on the walk next week, we can talk further about them then. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. That'll be good. That'll be great. Thank you. So
thanks for the positive vibes, everyone. It's nice to see so many of them. Thanks for your support.
it's great. Okay, thank you all. We might take a very brief 8-minute break since it's 2 minutes past 8. I'll see you all back here at 10 past 8 to get on with our Grassy Plains Network meeting. Thanks, Parks, and see you all shortly.
We will be off. Bye-bye.
Bye.